Well, welcome back, YouTubers. I'm your host, 2Money, and today we've got another interesting DLP goodie here for you guys to take a look at. This time it's the Mitsubishi WD-52725. That's one of their V26 series screens, and we'll be taking a closer look at that here in today's video. Welcome back, YouTubers. Before we get started, I'd encourage you guys, if you haven't already, to check out a previous video I did not long before this on a similar Toshiba model. There's a lot of similarities in those, and I'll be drawing a lot of comparisons from that, so it might help as a viewer to watch that. It's also worth noting that we're going off the tripod today once again for this one as well, and we're going to be at the mercy here of my unsteady recording hand and the autofocus and exposure. So let's get started. Like I was saying earlier, I got this Mitsubishi for free with the Toshiba we looked at last week from Craiglist. It wasn't working, and we'll go over some of the problems and issues with this later on in the video. We'll actually do sort of a repair guide too. This is one of their 2006-ish models as far as I know. You know, this one's probably middle to higher end for its time for this style of display. It's a 720p DLP rear projection. About it, we're gonna go straight to powering it up here. I did get standard remote with this. I believe this is the stock remote that these sets usually come with. This is their previous generation remote from our Mitsubishi WS48311 that we got upstairs. It's their CRT rear projection model. The DLP one is a little thicker, and it also has the button to turn on the lights on the right side instead of the left side, and it lights up the whole keypad. Either one will actually control either set, so we'll go ahead and start it up here. You can already see the green light down there. This one does take significantly longer to start up than the Toshiba did. Whereas the Toshiba, you could see a picture in seconds, and in next to no time you would have full brightness. This takes a lot longer to warm up, and as you can see now, we finally got the screensaver picture from the Xbox. First we'll take a look at the screen. It's a pretty typical Mitsubishi screen. So there is a thick plastic layer in front of the screen. This is one of their fancier models, as you can see here from the front. There's just typical control buttons to change the inputs. You can actually view the guide thing, menus, that kind of stuff. Pretty typical controls there on the front. There's also a little system reset button there in case something funny happens. And there's also a little hidden compartment here where you can plug in SD cards and Sony cards, whatever they're called, and then you can also plug up standard def stuff, and there's also a FireWire port back there. Two standard stereo speakers. I believe they're 10 watts each, as opposed to the Toshiba, which actually had speakers that were 20 watts each, I want to say. Anyway, let's take a look at the sides and stuff like that. On this set, the stylings, shape are a little bit different than they were on the Toshiba. This one has the speakers on the bottom, so I believe it's a little narrower, maybe a little taller. Don't quote me on that. It is significantly heavier. The Toshiba was 80-some pounds, and this is around 130 pounds. For this particular set, the lamp door is actually on the front behind this. Like their past rear projection sets, the front piece just comes off right about here, and the whole thing just slides off. It's just a little bit more difficult for me to demonstrate on this table. Here's the exhaust area for wind from the lamp fan, and there's also a dust filtery thing down here that has to be on or the set will not start. As we move to the back here, you may have noticed something that I didn't comment on as much on the Toshiba, and that is this is a significantly louder set. There's a lot of fans. There's even a standby fan that runs 24/7 as long as that thing has power. On the back, there's a great number of inputs and places to plug things in. As on the other one, we got a pair of coaxial antenna cable ports, only this time they're digital, so you can plug in your antenna, and I think you can plug this into QAM in the wall too. There's a handful of standard def inputs. There are 3 component inputs. The third one does double duty as an RGBHV port. There's also 1 HDMI port, and there's also a VGA port with sound inputs for that as well. There's also those FireWire ports. Now that we've finished our external tour of this, we'll take a look at some of its on-screen features and actual performance. Like I said before, or maybe I didn't say it before, this is a 52-inch diagonal screen, same as the Toshiba we looked at before. And it does look pretty good. I mean, this time around the settings actually did need to be tweaked a little bit. Keeping with the tradition like they've had on their CRT reprojection sets, you simply press video or audio on the remote to cycle through the various settings options on there. I found that most of the stuff works pretty well at their defaults, with the usual exceptions of color temperature, which you need to change to low, and contrast, which has to be turned back down to normal, and then brightness, which actually has to be moved up a little bit. I've got this one on 40 right now. There's just not a lot of shadow detail, and you actually have to bring that up a little bit, which you don't see a whole lot on fixed pixel sets. In the area of focus, geometry, and overscan, this actually fares slightly better than the Toshiba. There's somewhat less overscan, and the geometry is slightly more rectangular, although it is still not that great. On this set, however, it is a little different. There's actually a second mirror in these sets, so that you can adjust with some screws and stuff the position of that mirror to slightly modify the geometry, but there's not really much you can do about the overscan where picture's just not hitting the screen. There's no real good way to zoom in and out as far as I know. But there are a number of interesting things you can do with the menus, which we'll take a look at here real quick. When you hit menu, you'll notice, especially if you're new to their DLP sets, there's this newfangled looking menu with a lot of the same options as the other sets had. Setup is pretty typical stuff, although you do get individual color adjustment for each and every input, not just the analog cable ones like last time. Then there's settings for their fancy-dancy net command thing, which I think has something to do with the FireWire ports and controlling other devices. I don't really know how that works exactly. There's settings for the antenna inputs. Time settings. It does seem to keep time pretty well when it loses power. Settings for the typical settings for closed captions, child lock settings, and then the audio video settings, although there's a few additional things. Another interesting menu that these sets have is the device menu. This time when you press up on device on the remote, instead of just giving you a different going to the next one, it gives you a little menu here where you can choose which one you want to look at. And I apologize for how this looks on the screen. That's as good as I could get it to go, though. Which brings us to one of the other odd points of the set, and that is the labels for each input are confusing in that they have 3 different labels. There's 1, what you'd call it in real life, component 1. 2, there's whatever's printed on the back of the television's case. And then 3, there's finally whatever's in the device menu. The VGA port is labeled PC on both the menu and the set's casing. The HDMI port is labeled HDMI/M-Link on the back of the case, but in the menu, for whatever reason, it's labeled MonLink. I don't know how they got that out of HDMI, but that is what it is labeled as here on this television. There's also a few Easter eggs hidden in the menu. For different codes. I believe if you type in 2457, that gives you the service menu, and so there's a number of different settings you can use here, but probably the most handy part about this is if you press rewind or fast forward on the remote, you can get different test patterns. This one right here shows you just how off the geometry and stuff is on here, and you can go back either way through these, and there's a number of interesting patterns on here that the set does come with. I know these are very hard to see in the video here looking at the monitor. This is like a solid gray, solid black. It's like a grid pattern, different colors. And then you can just press menu to get out of that, and everything will go back to normal. There's also a hidden demo mode. If you press 0Q0, and it'll give you a blue screen, and then this little slideshow thing will happen. You can press menu 0Q0 to get out of that again, and it'll say demo disabled at the top. Pressing menu 2470 will give you this screen. There's not a whole lot of settings you can adjust here, but you can get the lamp hours. Speaking of troubleshooting, these are actually pretty troublesome sets. If you ever search one of these up, the most common thing you'll see in the search results is probably the blinking green light of death. What that refers to is when you first plug in this set, booting up, that light blinks 40-45 seconds. A lot of times on all throughout the different boards inside of that chassis, there's a number of problems with the capacitors in there on different boards, and you can get all sorts of interesting problems from video problems to the blinking green light of death, where the light just blinks forever, which is pretty common for a lot of people. And the good news is you don't have to go looking around eBay for capacitors like I did anymore. Mitsubishi actually is doing a free repair program on these. You just call them up and they will sort that all out for you. On ours, they actually sent a whole new chassis, which is a pretty big part, and they also paid a local repair shop to install it for us free of charge. Only after we installed that, we discovered that there was also a problem with the ballast. When we tried to start it up, after the technician had installed the new chassis, we just got the lamp wouldn't light. And the person I got this from claimed that there was a brand new lamp inside of it. So we thought that was a little strange, and we did some testing with what I called the holy grail of troubleshooting for this set, for the infamous solid red light, or the lamp won't light, or whatever you want to call it. This handy-dandy troubleshooting chart. And if you have this problem with your set and you know the lamp is good, by all means click that link in the description and take a closer look at that picture if you have a multimeter, and that will get you on your way to troubleshooting whatever the problem is for you. One last very odd note worth mentioning about my set that I have not seen on any others posted on any forums anywhere, surprisingly enough, is a strange bug that happens only on the VGA input. So I'm going to go to that VGA input real quick. I'm going to move the camera real close to the screen so you can get a very good clear look at it. I'm going to click on the input, and I'm going to pull up the device menu again. You can see, if you look very closely, there's kind of some glitching in the picture. It's very subtle, and the funny thing is it's only on the menu. You don't see this on the input itself. There's just a little glitching, and I can see it here through the viewfinder. It's just it's subtle, but it's there. I mean, I don't know if you'd call it tearing or what. It's on any menus, anything generated by the set itself, it does that on. So that's a very strange thing. But I would like to hear from my YouTube audience that have a question or anything like that. Feel free to leave a comment or a personal message. Other than that, I hope you enjoyed today's video. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next week.